Marcus Chen adjusted his environmental suit one last time before stepping off the transport ship's ramp. The humid air of Zirian 7 immediately fogged his visor, forcing him to switch to thermal vision. Through the haze, towering crystalline trees stretched impossibly high, their razor-sharp leaves catching the planet's dual suns and creating a deadly light show that could blind most species. The Galactic Survival Corps instructor, a six-armed Threnody named Velter, chittered nervously as Marcus began his descent into what the galaxy considered one of the most lethal training grounds ever discovered. Every cadet from the 100 known civilizations had to complete their survival training in groups of 12. Every cadet except humans. "Remember, Trainee Chen?" Velter's voice crackled through the comm system. "This is unprecedented. No species has ever attempted solo survival training on a Class X Deathworld. Your physiology readings suggest you might survive, but the psychological pressure alone has driven entire teams to madness." Marcus smiled beneath his helmet. Earth had been classified as a Class IX Deathworld when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Alliance 3 years ago. The revelation had stunned the galactic community. Most species evolved on Class II or III worlds, with gentle gravity, stable weather, and predictable ecosystems. Earth's violent weather patterns, aggressive wildlife, crushing gravity, and toxic atmosphere had created what the galaxy's xenobiologists called impossible creatures. "Understood, instructor. Beginning descent now," Marcus replied, his voice steady as he rappelled down the cliff face toward the forest floor. The first sign of Zirian 7 hostility came within minutes. A crystalline vine, nearly invisible against the tree bark, lashed out with the speed of a bullet. Marcus's enhanced reflexes, honed by growing up dodging Earth's various predators, allowed him to twist aside. The vine struck the rock where his head had been, shattering into thousands of needle-sharp fragments. "First contact with flora," Marcus reported calmly, brushing crystal dust from his suit. "Defensive response successful." In the orbiting command center, representatives from dozens of species watched the humans' progress with fascination and growing unease. The Velanti ambassador, whose people were considered among the galaxy's premier survivors, leaned forward in her hover chair. "How is he so calm?" she whispered to her aide. "The psychological stress readings should be off the charts." Her aide, a nervous Kethran whose people had evolved from prey animals, shook his head. "His cortisol levels are actually lower than baseline. It's as if he's relaxing." Down on the surface, Marcus had begun to notice something peculiar. As he moved through the undergrowth, creatures that should have been attacking him were instead keeping their distance. A pack of razor wolves, each the size of a small vehicle with metallic fangs designed to pierce armor, had tracked him for over an hour. But instead of attacking, they maintained a respectful distance, occasionally whimpering when he looked in their direction. The phenomenon became more pronounced when Marcus encountered his first apex predator. The Zirian Deathstalker emerged from its crystalline den, a magnificent creature standing 4 meters tall with scales that could deflect plasma fire. Its eyes, evolved to track the fastest prey, locked onto Marcus immediately. For a moment, human and alien predator stared at each other across 10 meters of deadly terrain. Marcus's training kicked in and he began to assess threat levels and escape routes, but something unexpected happened. The Deathstalker's aggressive posture began to change. Its raised hackles lowered, its killing claws retracted. Slowly, almost submissively, the massive predator stepped aside. Marcus blinked in surprise. According to his briefing materials, Deathstalkers were known to attack anything that moved, regardless of size or threat level. They were one of the reasons no training group had ever achieved a 100% survival rate on Zirian 7. "Interesting behavioral observation," Marcus reported. "Target apex predator displaying non-aggressive stance, proceeding with caution." As he walked past the Deathstalker, Marcus noticed the creature's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Its eyes tracked his movement, but there was something in that alien gaze that looked almost like recognition, or fear. The day's events followed a similar pattern. Every predator Marcus encountered, from the smallest crystal wasps to the massive stone bears, reacted to his presence with what could only be described as deference. They didn't flee exactly, but they moved aside, creating clear paths through territories that should have been impassable. By evening, when Marcus set up his temporary shelter in a clearing that should have been contested by at least 3 different predator species, he was alone except for the distant sounds of creatures moving through the darkness. But those sounds weren't the hunting calls his instructors had warned him about. They were the soft, careful noises of animals trying very hard not to disturb something they respected. Day 1 complete, Marcus reported as he activated his shelter's defensive systems. No injuries sustained. Wildlife behavior patterns differ significantly from briefing materials. Recommend further study. In orbit, the gathered alien observers exchanged worried glances. The Threnody instructor, Velter's 4 primary arms trembled as he reviewed the day's recordings. "This changes everything we know about apex predator behavior," he muttered. "They're treating him like a superior predator," finished the Velanti ambassador. "But that's impossible. Humans are new to the galaxy. These creatures have no evolutionary history with Earth species." The Kethran aide pulled up biological readings from Marcus's suit. "His pheromone output is unlike anything we've recorded. It's subtle, but there's something in his chemical signature that's triggering responses in every creature he encounters." As the alien night fell over Zirian 7, Marcus settled into his sleeping bag, unaware that his mere presence had caused every predator within a 5-kilometer radius to relocate. For the first time in the planet's recorded history, the deadly crystalline forest had fallen completely silent, as if even the wind was holding its breath around the strange creature from the impossible world called Earth. Unknown to Marcus, his first day on Zirian 7 had just rewritten the galactic understanding of what it truly meant to be an apex predator. And tomorrow would bring even greater revelations, as word of the human's unprecedented solo journey began to spread through the galaxy's most dangerous corners. Marcus woke to an eerie silence that his instructors had specifically warned him would never occur on Zirian 7. The planet's dawn usually brought a cacophony of territorial disputes, hunting calls, and the screams of prey. Instead, he emerged from his shelter to find the crystalline forest bathed in peaceful morning light, with no sounds except the gentle chiming of crystal leaves in the breeze. His suit's external sensors detected movement all around him, but nothing approached. Through thermal imaging, Marcus could see dozens of creatures maintaining a perimeter around his position, but all at a respectful distance. It was as if he had unknowingly established some kind of neutral zone. "Day 2 beginning," Marcus reported to the orbiting command center. "Continuing mission parameters. Note, local wildlife behavior remains non-standard." He began his trek toward the mission's first checkpoint, a natural spring located in the territory of what the briefings had called the most aggressively territorial predator complex in known space. The Zirian hive hunters were pack predators that operated with military precision, using crystalline communication networks to coordinate attacks across vast distances. No previous training group had successfully crossed their territory without losing at least one member. As Marcus approached the boundary markers of hive hunter territory, marked by towering crystal formations carved with territorial warnings, he expected to encounter the advanced scouts. According to his training materials, hive hunters would begin probing attacks hours before a target entered their core territory. Instead, Marcus found something unprecedented. Waiting at the territorial boundary stood a single hive hunter, but not in an attack posture. The creature, standing 3 meters tall with chitinous armor and 4 independently operating eyes, held what Marcus recognized as a submission posture. Its weapons arms were folded against its body, its head lowered, and its communication crystals were dark. "Making contact with Hive Hunter representative," Marcus reported, his hand instinctively moving toward his emergency weapon before stopping. Something about the creature's body language suggested this wasn't a threat. The Hive Hunter raised its head slowly, its 4 eyes focusing on Marcus with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Instead, Marcus felt an odd sense of familiarity. The creature's gaze reminded him of his childhood encounters with wolves in Earth's wilderness areas. There was intelligence there, and something that looked remarkably like respect. Without breaking eye contact, the Hive Hunter stepped aside and gestured toward a clear path through the crystal formations. It was offering safe passage through territory that had claimed the lives of countless experienced warriors from across the galaxy. Marcus nodded respectfully to the creature and began walking the indicated path. As he moved deeper into Hive Hunter territory, he became aware of movement in his peripheral vision. The entire pack was shadowing his journey, moving parallel to his route through the crystalline trees. But they maintained their distance, and their movement patterns were clearly protective rather than predatory. This is unprecedented, Velter's voice crackled through the comm system from orbit. Hive hunters have never offered safe passage to anyone. Their territorial protocols have been consistent across thousands of documented encounters. Maybe they recognize something, Marcus replied, pausing to examine a particularly beautiful crystal formation. As he stopped, every shadowing hive hunter also stopped, maintaining their respectful distance. I've seen similar behavior patterns with pack predators on Earth. Earth predators work differently, interrupted Dr. Kelani, the Galactic Alliance's leading expert on predator behavior. Earth creatures evolved alongside humans. These have no evolutionary relationship with your species. This behavior defies all established xenobiology principles. As Marcus continued his journey, the mystery deepened. At what should have been the most dangerous point in hive hunter territory, where three different pack zones intersected in a region called the Killing Ground, Marcus found himself walking through a corridor of absolute safety. Hundreds of hive hunters from different packs had gathered, but instead of the territorial warfare that normally consumed this area, they stood in organized formations along his path. The sight was so unprecedented that several alien observers in the command center began recording emergency reports to their home governments. The Valdorian military attaché was already calculating the implications of humans being able to traverse previously impassable territories. Command, requesting permission to make an observational experiment, Marcus said as he reached the center of the Killing Ground. Negative, Trainee Chen. Maintain mission parameters, Velter responded quickly, but Dr. Kelani overrode him. Granted, this is a unique scientific opportunity. Proceed with caution. Marcus stopped walking and stood perfectly still in the center of the clearing. Immediately, the nearest hive hunters began to approach, but not aggressively. They moved in the careful, ritualistic manner that Marcus recognized from his studies of Earth's pack hierarchies. The largest hive hunter, clearly the alpha of one of the major packs, approached within arm's reach of Marcus. The creature was massive, with battle scars covering its crystalline armor and four arms each ending in razor-sharp claws capable of cutting through starship hulls. For a long moment, human and alien apex predator studied each other. Then, slowly, the hive hunter extended one massive arm toward Marcus, palm up, claws retracted. It was a gesture of offering, of recognition. Marcus, drawing on instincts developed through thousands of years of human interaction with Earth's predators, extended his own hand and placed it briefly on the creature's palm. The contact lasted only seconds, but the effect was electric. Every hive hunter in the clearing lowered their heads in a synchronized bow. Biological readings are off the charts, reported the Kethran aide from orbit, his voice shaking with excitement. The chemical exchange during that contact has triggered a response in every creature within scanner range. As Marcus resumed his journey toward the spring, the hive hunters didn't just offer safe passage. They began actively clearing his path, moving fallen crystal trees and filling dangerous crevices. It was as if an entire apex predator species had decided to serve as his escort. When Marcus finally reached the natural spring that marked his first checkpoint, he found it surrounded by creatures from a dozen different species, all maintaining peaceful coexistence in defiance of their normal predatory relationships. The spring, which should have been a battlefield of competing predators, had become a temporary sanctuary. Checkpoint 1 achieved, Marcus reported as he filled his water containers. Local ecosystem appears to have achieved unprecedented stability. All species present displaying cooperative behavior. As he prepared to leave the spring and continue toward his second checkpoint, Marcus noticed that several of the smaller predators had begun following him at a distance, as if unwilling to let him leave their territory. The implications were staggering. His presence wasn't just calming the local predators, it was fundamentally altering the ecosystem's balance. The Galactic Alliance observers watched in stunned silence as the human prepared to enter the even deadlier territory that lay ahead. Word of the unprecedented events was already spreading through the galaxy's scientific community, raising questions that would reshape their understanding of predator evolution, interspecies communication, and the true nature of the creatures from the impossible world called Earth. But for Marcus, walking alone through territories that had claimed the lives of thousands, it felt perfectly natural. After all, he had grown up in a world where apex predators had learned to coexist with the most dangerous species their planet had ever produced, humanity. The second day's journey took Marcus into the shattered canyons, where Zirian 7 geological instability had created a maze of razor-sharp crystal formations and unstable cliff faces. This region was home to the Void Stalkers, creatures so dangerous that even the Galactic Alliance's military units required full combat armor and heavy weapons to survive encounters with them. Void Stalkers were unique among Zirian 7 predators because they hunted using dimensional manipulation, able to phase partially out of normal space to attack from impossible angles. Their crystalline carapaces were virtually indestructible, and their hunting strategies had evolved to counter every known military technology in the galaxy. As Marcus descended into the canyon system, his suit's sensors immediately detected the telltale dimensional distortions that indicated Void Stalker presence. According to protocol, he should have activated his suit's maximum defensive systems and called for emergency extraction. Instead, he simply adjusted his route slightly to avoid the most unstable crystal formations and continued walking. Multiple Void Stalker signatures detected, Marcus reported calmly, proceeding with standard caution protocols. In the orbiting command center, panic rippled through the alien observers. The Threnody instructor Velter's 6 arms flailed in distress, while emergency protocols activated across multiple monitoring stations. "Trainee Chen, you need to activate full defensive measures immediately," Velter's voice crackled with static-laden urgency. "Void Stalkers don't follow normal predator behavior patterns. They're interdimensional hunters with no known submission responses." But as Marcus continued his descent into the canyon, something extraordinary began to happen. The dimensional distortions around him, instead of intensifying in preparation for attack, began to stabilize. The chaotic energy signatures that typically preceded Void Stalker ambushes smoothed into regular, almost peaceful patterns. Marcus paused on a crystal ledge and looked around at the canyon walls surrounding him. Through his suit's enhanced vision, he could see the shimmering outlines of Void Stalkers phasing in and out of normal space, but their movements weren't predatory. They were curious, almost tentative. "Observational note," Marcus said as he continued his careful descent. "Void Stalker hunting patterns appear to be modified by unknown environmental factors. No aggressive positioning detected." Dr. Kelani's voice cut through the calm chatter from orbit. "Marcus, I want you to try something. Stop moving and see what they do." Marcus found a stable platform of crystal and stood perfectly still. Within moments, the air around him began to shimmer as multiple Void Stalkers phased into normal space. Instead of the lightning-fast attacks described in every military manual, the creatures materialized slowly, cautiously. The nearest Void Stalker, a magnificent creature twice Marcus's height with crystalline armor that seemed to bend light around it, approached within striking distance. Its 4 primary sensors fixed on Marcus with an intensity that should have been terrifying. But Marcus recognized the look. He had seen it before, in the eyes of Earth's apex predators when they encountered something they couldn't quite classify. The Void Stalker extended one of its dimensional manipulation appendages toward Marcus, not to attack, but to sense. The appendage passed through the air near Marcus without quite touching him, reading energy signatures that human science was only beginning to understand. "They're scanning me," Marcus reported, remaining perfectly still as more Void Stalkers materialized around him. "Chemical, bioelectric, and dimensional readings. It's like they're trying to identify my species classification." What happened next sent shockwaves through the galactic scientific community. The lead Void Stalker, after completing its scans, began to emit a series of dimensional pulses. These weren't weapons discharges but communication patterns, complex harmonics that rippled through space-time itself. Other Void Stalkers began responding with their own harmonic patterns, creating a dimensional symphony around Marcus. The patterns were incredibly complex, involving mathematics that stretched the limits of galactic scientific understanding, but Marcus found himself beginning to recognize emotional content in the communications. "They're discussing me," Marcus realized, speaking softly to avoid disrupting the dimensional harmonics. "It's a debate of some kind. I can feel the decision-making process." The debate continued for several minutes before reaching what was clearly a consensus. The lead Void Stalker approached Marcus again, this time extending a fully materialized appendage. The gesture was unmistakably an invitation. Marcus, drawing on every survival instinct he had developed on Earth, slowly extended his own hand and briefly touched the alien appendage. The contact sent a shock of information through both beings, a rapid exchange of biological and psychological data that bypassed language entirely. In that instant, Marcus understood. The Void Stalkers weren't just apex predators. They were apex predators with advanced intelligence, capable of recognizing and respecting the predatory status of other species. And something in his biology, some combination of human evolutionary history and psychological markers, had identified him as not just another prey species, but as a fellow apex predator worthy of recognition. The effect was immediate and profound. Every Void Stalker in the canyon began shifting position, not to surround Marcus for an attack, but to form an honor guard. They were offering him safe passage through their territory as a mark of respect between equals. "This is impossible," breathed the Valdorian military attaché from orbit. "Void Stalkers have never shown recognition behavior toward any galactic species. They're solitary hunters with no social structures." "Apparently they do have social structures," Dr. Kalani corrected, her voice filled with scientific excitement. "We just never met anyone they considered worthy of social interaction." As Marcus resumed his journey through the shattered canyons, his Void Stalker escort maintained formation around him, their dimensional abilities allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain with impossible grace. They guided him around the most dangerous crystal formations, warned him of unstable cliff faces, and even cleared debris from his path. The escort continued until Marcus reached the far edge of Void Stalker territory, where the canyons gave way to the burning plains that would challenge him on day 3. At the territorial boundary, the Void Stalkers stopped and gathered in a formal formation. The lead Void Stalker approached Marcus one final time, extending multiple appendages in what was clearly a farewell gesture. Marcus responded by placing his hands on the offered appendages, feeling again that electric exchange of recognition and respect. Then, with a synchronized dimensional pulse that created a brief aurora in the canyon air, the Void Stalkers phased out of normal space and disappeared, leaving Marcus alone at the edge of their territory. "Transit through Void Stalker territory complete," Marcus reported as he prepared for the next phase of his journey. "No incidents reported. Relationship with local apex predators remains positive." Behind him, the shattered canyons had fallen into the same peaceful quiet that seemed to follow Marcus wherever he went. For the first time in recorded history, Void Stalkers had ended a territorial encounter without violence, adding another impossible chapter to the growing legend of the human who walked alone through the galaxy's deadliest training ground. As word of Marcus's encounters spread through the galactic communication networks, scientists and military strategists began asking questions that would reshape their understanding of predator hierarchies, interspecies communication, and humanity's place in the galaxy's complex ecosystem of power and survival. The burning plains stretched before Marcus like an alien hellscape, where superheated crystal formations created a maze of thermal vents and razor-sharp obstacles. The temperature here reached levels that could melt most galactic species' environmental suits within minutes. Worse still, this was the domain of the thermal dragons, massive predators that had evolved to thrive in conditions that would kill almost any other life form. Marcus checked his suit's cooling systems one final time before stepping onto the reflective crystal sand that covered the plains. Immediately, his suit's external temperature readings spiked, and his cooling systems activated with a low hum. According to his mission briefing, he would have 6 hours to cross the plains before his cooling systems failed completely. Entering thermal dragon territory, Marcus reported as shimmering heat waves distorted his vision. Environmental suits functioning within normal parameters, beginning crossing procedures. From orbit, the alien observers watched with growing anxiety. The burning plains had never been successfully crossed by a single individual. Even the most experienced military units required specialized vehicles and constant supply drops to survive the journey. "His suit readings are already at 85% cooling capacity," reported the Kethran aide, his voice tight with concern. "At this rate, he'll have maybe 4 hours before system failure." But Marcus had grown up in Earth's deserts, had trained in Death Valley and the Sahara. He understood heat management not just as a technological challenge, but as a physiological and psychological one. He began adjusting his movement patterns, finding the small patches of shade cast by crystal formations, timing his progress to take advantage of thermal currents that could provide microseconds of relief. The first thermal dragon appeared within an hour, rising from what Marcus had assumed was a natural crystal formation. The creature was magnificent and terrifying, standing 5 meters tall with scales that glowed like molten metal and breath that turned sand to glass. Its eyes were adapted to see in the extreme heat spectrum, and they fixed on Marcus with predatory interest. According to every military manual in the galactic database, encountering a thermal dragon meant immediate death. They were solitary apex predators with no recorded instances of non-aggressive behavior. They attacked everything that moved in their territory, viewing all other life forms as either prey or competitors to be eliminated. Marcus stopped walking and stood perfectly still, using techniques he had learned from surviving encounters with dangerous animals on Earth. He made himself neither threatening nor prey-like, simply present and respectful of the creature's territory. The thermal dragon approached cautiously, its massive claws leaving molten footprints in the crystal sand. Marcus could feel the radiant heat from its body even through his suit's insulation. When the creature was close enough to kill him with a single breath, it stopped and tilted its massive head, studying him with an intelligence that military reports had never acknowledged. Thermal dragon behavioral patterns differ from expected parameters, Marcus reported softly, not wanting to startle the creature. Possible curiosity response detected. The dragon circled Marcus slowly, its movements careful and deliberate. With each step, its body heat created small thermal storms in the air around them, but Marcus noticed that the creature was positioning itself to shield him from the worst of the ambient heat radiating from the crystal formations. "It's protecting me from environmental hazards," Marcus realized, speaking barely above a whisper. "Thermal management behavior." The revelation sent shock waves through the galactic scientific community. Dr. Kalani's voice crackled through the comm system with barely contained excitement. "Marcus, thermal dragons are supposed to be incapable of protective behavior. They're described as purely destructive predators." "Maybe the descriptions were incomplete," Marcus replied as the dragon completed its circle and positioned itself between Marcus and the most intense heat sources. "Earth predators often show protective behaviors toward creatures they respect." As Marcus resumed his journey across the plains, the thermal dragon began to follow him, maintaining a position that provided maximum heat shielding. The creature's presence actually made the crossing easier, as its body heat created convection currents that carried away some of the ambient thermal energy. But the real surprise came when they encountered more thermal dragons. Instead of the territorial conflicts that should have erupted when multiple solitary predators met, the dragons began coordinating their movements to create an optimal thermal environment for Marcus's passage. "Multiple thermal dragon cooperation detected," Marcus reported as a third dragon joined their group. "They're working together to manage environmental hazards." The alien observers watched in stunned silence as creatures that had been classified as incapable of cooperation began demonstrating advanced teamwork. The dragons positioned themselves at precise intervals along Marcus's route, creating thermal shadows and wind patterns that turned the deadly burning plains into merely difficult terrain. "This changes everything we know about thermal dragon social structures," breathed the Valdorian military attaché. "If they're capable of coordination, they're potentially the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." "Or the most valuable allies," Dr. Kalani corrected, studying the precision of the dragon's movements. "Look at the mathematical complexity of their positioning. This isn't just cooperation, it's advanced tactical planning." As the day progressed, Marcus found himself at the center of an unprecedented phenomenon. An entire population of thermal dragons had emerged from their lairs to participate in his safe passage across their territory. They moved with military precision, constantly adjusting their formations to optimize thermal conditions while maintaining defensive positions against other environmental hazards. When a thermal storm began building on the horizon, threatening to create temperatures that would overwhelm even Marcus's enhanced environmental suit, the dragons responded immediately. They formed a protective formation around him, their own heat signatures creating a counter-pattern that neutralized the approaching storm. "Environmental threat mitigation by indigenous species," Marcus reported, as the thermal storm dissipated harmlessly around the dragon formation. Local apex predators displaying advanced protective protocols. The implications were staggering. Not only were humans being recognized as apex predators by the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, but those creatures were actively working to ensure human survival. It suggested levels of intelligence and social organization that had never been documented. As Marcus approached the far edge of the burning plains, where the crystal formations gave way to the shadow forests that would challenge him on his final day, his dragon escort began to slow. They had reached the limits of their territory, but their reluctance to let him continue alone was obvious. The largest dragon, the first one he had encountered, approached Marcus one final time. The creature lowered its massive head until its glowing eyes were level with Marcus's helmet. For a long moment, they studied each other across the vast evolutionary gap between their species. Then the dragon did something that would be talked about in galactic scientific circles for generations. It extended one massive claw and gently touched Marcus's helmet in what could only be described as a blessing or benediction. "Thermal Dragon Farewell Protocol observed," Marcus reported, his voice thick with emotion he didn't fully understand. "Relationship with local apex predators remains positive." As Marcus crossed into the shadow forests, the dragons arranged themselves in a line at the territorial boundary, their glowing bodies creating a wall of light against the darkness ahead. They would remain there until Marcus was safely beyond their ability to protect him, standing guard against any threat that might pursue him into the shadows. Behind Marcus, the burning plains fell silent except for the quiet rumble of dragon communications, a low harmonic that seemed to carry messages of respect and protection across the thermal wasteland. The impossible human had passed through their domain unharmed, leaving behind creatures who had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator was also the most worthy of protection. Tomorrow would bring the final test, in forests where shadows themselves were predators. But tonight, Marcus camped at the forest edge with the knowledge that somewhere behind him, the most feared creatures on Zirian 7 stood watch over his sleep. The shadow forest represented the final and most deadly challenge of Zirian 7's survival course. Here, darkness itself had evolved into a predatory force, where living shadows fed on light and life energy. The trees were black crystal that absorbed all illumination, creating a realm of absolute darkness where conventional sensors failed and most species experienced complete sensory deprivation within minutes. Marcus stood at the forest edge as Zirian 7 dual suns began to set, watching the last traces of light disappear into the crystalline branches overhead. His suit systems automatically switched to emergency protocols as darkness fell, but he knew that even the most advanced technology would provide only minimal assistance in the realm ahead. "Entering shadow forest territory," Marcus reported as he stepped beneath the light-devouring canopy. "Beginning final phase of survival training." Within seconds, the darkness was so complete that Marcus's enhanced vision systems could detect nothing beyond arm's reach. The silence was equally profound, broken only by the soft whisper of shadow predators moving through the black crystal trees. According to every military report, shadow hunters were the most dangerous predators on Zirian 7 because they attacked through methods that most galactic species couldn't even perceive. But Marcus had grown up in Earth's deepest caves and darkest forests. He had learned to navigate by sound, smell, and electromagnetic sensation when vision failed. As he moved deeper into the shadow realm, he began to understand that the darkness here wasn't just an absence of light, but a living ecosystem with its own predatory intelligence. "Sensory adaptation protocols engaged," Marcus reported softly. "Local environment requires alternative navigation methods." The first shadow hunter made contact within an hour, but not in the way military reports described. Instead of the lightning-fast attack that typically killed trespassers instantly, Marcus felt a gentle pressure against his consciousness, a probing intelligence that seemed to be examining his thoughts and intentions. Marcus stopped walking and opened his mind to the contact, using meditation techniques he had learned from Earth's indigenous cultures. The shadow hunter's probe deepened, flowing through his memories and psychological patterns with a thoroughness that should have been terrifying. "Psychic contact established with indigenous predator," Marcus reported calmly. "Non-hostile examination in progress." In the orbiting command center, Alien observers watched biosensor readouts that defied all understanding. Marcus's brain activity showed patterns consistent with deep meditative states, while his stress hormones remained at baseline levels. He was experiencing direct mental contact with one of the galaxy's most feared predators and treating it like a peaceful conversation. His neural patterns are synchronizing with something, reported the Kethran aide, his voice filled with scientific wonder. It's like he's establishing a direct communication link. The Shadow Hunter's examination continued for several minutes before reaching what felt like a conclusion. The pressure against Marcus's consciousness shifted from investigative to something resembling approval. Then, gradually, the absolute darkness around him began to change. It didn't become brighter, but somehow Marcus found he could see. The Shadow Hunter was sharing its own sensory capabilities with him, allowing him to perceive the forest through senses that had evolved specifically for this environment. Trees became visible as heat patterns, paths appeared as electromagnetic trails, and other shadow predators manifested as shifting patterns of living darkness. Visual enhancement provided by indigenous species, Marcus reported with wonder in his voice. Symbiotic sensory sharing established. What he saw through the Shadow Hunter's enhanced perception was breathtaking. The Shadow Forest wasn't a realm of death and predation as military reports described, but a complex ecosystem where darkness had evolved into beauty. Bioluminescent patterns flowed through the black crystal trees like veins of starlight, and shadow predators moved through the canopy in elaborate dance patterns that spoke of intelligence and culture. As Marcus continued his journey through the forest, more shadow hunters began making contact, each adding their own sensory capabilities to his enhanced perception. Soon, he was seeing the forest through the collective consciousness of its apex predators, experiencing a form of group intelligence that transcended individual awareness. Multiple psychic contacts established, Marcus reported, his voice filled with awe. Collective intelligence network accessed, local ecosystem far more complex than previously documented. The Shadow Hunters began guiding Marcus through their territory, showing him paths that existed only in their shared consciousness, and revealing secrets of the forest that no outsider had ever witnessed. They shared memories of the forest's history, images of how the shadow ecosystem had evolved over millions of years, and even philosophical concepts about the nature of darkness and light. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus learned that shadow hunters weren't just predators but guardians of knowledge, keepers of secrets that stretched back to the earliest days of galactic evolution. They had been waiting for thousands of years for a species capable of true mental communion, someone who could understand their complex civilization. They're not just predators, Marcus realized, speaking aloud to help process the flood of information flowing through his enhanced consciousness. They're scholars, philosophers, keepers of galactic history. They've been documenting the evolution of every species that's ever visited this world. The revelation sent shock waves through the galactic scientific community. Dr. Kelani's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled excitement. Marcus, if what you're saying is true, the Shadow Hunters possess knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of galactic evolution. As Marcus approached the forest center, where his final checkpoint waited, the Shadow Hunters revealed the ultimate secret of Zirian 7. The planet wasn't just a training ground for survival skills. It was a testing facility designed by an ancient galactic civilization to identify species capable of true interspecies communion. Every predator Marcus had encountered, from the crystal wasps to the thermal dragons, was part of an elaborate evaluation system. They had been testing his species' capacity for understanding, respect, and cooperation with alien forms of life, and humanity had passed every test. Final checkpoint achieved, Marcus reported as he reached the ancient crystalline structure at the forest's heart. Mission parameters exceeded, significant xenobiological discoveries documented. But the Shadow Hunters weren't finished. Through their collective consciousness, they began sharing the most precious gift they could offer: the locations of other testing worlds throughout the galaxy, planets where humanity could continue to prove itself worthy of joining the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations. As Marcus prepared to activate his extraction beacon, the Shadow Hunters offered him one final choice. He could return to his ship and report his discoveries through normal channels, or he could accept their invitation to become the first human ambassador to the galaxy's hidden civilizations. the ancient species that had been watching and evaluating from the shadows for millennia. Marcus looked up at the light-absorbing canopy overhead, where countless shadow hunters waited for his decision. Around him, the crystalline forest pulsed with ancient intelligence and patient wisdom. Behind him stretched a path back to the familiar world of human understanding. "Command requesting clarification of mission parameters," Marcus said softly. "Opportunity for extended xenobiological research has presented itself, awaiting instructions." The response came not from the orbiting command center, but from Earth itself, transmitted across light years of space with unprecedented urgency. Humanity's leaders had been monitoring every moment of Marcus's journey, and they understood the implications of what he had discovered. "Permission granted, Trainee Chen," came the voice of the Galactic Alliance's human representative. "You are authorized to accept any opportunities for cultural exchange that present themselves. Humanity stands ready to take its place among the galaxy's advanced civilizations." Marcus smiled as he felt the Shadow Hunter's approval ripple through the collective consciousness surrounding him. His solo journey through a Deathworld had become something far more significant. Humanity's first step toward joining a galactic community that existed in the spaces between the known civilizations, in the shadows where the oldest and wisest species had been waiting for someone worthy of their attention. As the Shadow Forest's ancient intelligence embraced him fully, Marcus Chen became the first human to discover that surviving a Deathworld was just the beginning. The real test was proving worthy of the trust that survival earned, and humanity had just passed with honors that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly civilized. The galaxy would never be the same, because the species from the impossible world called Earth had walked among the apex predators and been recognized not as conquerors, but as equals deserving of the deepest secrets the universe had to offer.